It was a Wednesday evening when the entire world I thought I knew came crashing down. I had just returned from work, the familiar sounds of the city fading away as I stepped into the sanctuary of our small apartment. The smell of dinner wafted through the air, a sweet and savory aroma that usually made my heart swell with warmth. But this time, it felt more like a noose tightening around my throat. I dropped my bag by the door and called out for her. "Sarah, I'm home." The silence that followed was unnerving. I walked into the living room and found her sitting on the couch, her phone in hand. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and guilty, and a knot formed in my stomach. "Hey, how was work?" she asked, her voice far too cheerful for the moment. "Fine," I replied, trying to shake off the unease that settled over me, but my instincts were screaming something was off. I noticed the way she fidgeted with her hair, a telltale sign that she was hiding something. "You seem distracted." Before I could even process it, my gaze drifted to the window. There he was, David, our neighbor. He was out on his balcony, laughing with a woman I didn't recognize. I felt an inexplicable pang of jealousy, but it was quickly overshadowed by something darker. "Do you know David?" I asked, my voice steady even as my heart raced. "Yeah, he's a nice guy," she said, shrugging it off like it was nothing. But the way she said it, the way her cheeks flushed, sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. I could feel the tension building, thick and suffocating. I needed to confront her, to peel back the layers of this mystery. "Sarah, is there something you want to tell me?" Her eyes darted away, and that was when I knew. It was like a punch to the gut. "You're having an affair with him, aren't you?" I blurted out, my voice cracking. The silence that followed was deafening. Her expression morphed from surprise to a grim acceptance, and in that moment I felt a piece of myself shatter. "How could you do this to us?" I demanded, my voice rising in anger and disbelief. I didn't mean for it to happen," she stammered, tears brimming in her eyes. "It just happened." I couldn't process her words. "You didn't mean for it to happen. Sarah, this isn't a mistake, this is betrayal." My heart was pounding, and I felt a mix of rage and despair. I had given her my heart, my life, and she had thrown it away for some fleeting thrill with our neighbor. As I stood there, I felt an odd sense of clarity amidst the chaos. I was angry, yes, but beneath that anger simmered a deep sadness. I thought back to our wedding day, the promises we made, the dreams we shared. I had always believed we were a team, that we were building a life together. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw a stranger staring back at me, someone who had chosen to betray everything we had built. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead I felt a strange sense of resignation wash over me. I needed to think, to process what had just happened. In the days that followed, the apartment felt like a prison. Every corner held memories of a life that felt like a lie. I wandered the halls, lost in my thoughts, replaying moments that now seemed tainted. I remembered the times we laughed together, the quiet evenings spent cooking dinner, the dreams we had for the future. Each memory was like a dagger to my heart, twisting deeper, with the realization that she had shared those moments with someone else. The betrayal gnawed at me, and I found myself contemplating my next steps. I didn't want to confront her again, not yet. I needed to gather my thoughts, to figure out what I wanted. As days turned into weeks, I realized I needed to reclaim my life. The thought of moving out began to take root in my mind. I envisioned a fresh start, a place where I could redefine who I was outside of this shattered marriage. I began to think about what it would mean to leave her behind in our tiny apartment while I moved to a mansion, a symbol of freedom and success. But was it really freedom, or was it just an escape? I didn't know yet, but I was determined to find out. The days dragged on in a blur of anger and confusion. Each moment spent in the apartment felt like an eternity. I could hear Sarah moving around, the clinking of dishes, the faint sounds of her sobs echoing through the walls, but I remained distant, trapped in my own thoughts. I felt like a ghost in my own home, each room a reminder of the life we once shared, now tainted by betrayal. I often found myself staring out of the window, watching the world go by as if I were a spectator in my own life. I could see David across the way, laughing and joking with friends, seemingly unaware of the turmoil simmering just a few feet away. The sight of him made my blood boil, yet I couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. He was living freely while I was stuck in this emotional quagmire. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. I was angry, yes, but sadness wrapped around me like a heavy cloak. I felt betrayed not just by her, but by the life we had built together. I thought about our plans, the vacations we had dreamed of, the house we wanted to buy. All of it felt so far away now, like a mirage fading into the distance. I began to reflect on our marriage, trying to piece together the moments that had led us to this point. There were signs, of course, subtle hints I had overlooked, moments when she seemed distant or distracted. I remembered the late nights at work, the times she would receive texts and quickly hide her phone. I had brushed them off, convincing myself it was just work stress or personal matters. How could I have been so blind? Yet, as I sifted through these memories, I found a strange sense of relief. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with a newfound clarity. I realized I had been living for her, catering to her needs, while my own desires faded into the background. I had sacrificed parts of myself to be the perfect husband, only to find that my efforts had been in vain. The thought of leaving began to solidify in my mind. It was a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I imagined moving to a mansion, a space that would symbolize my freedom from the shackles of our marriage. It would be a fresh start, a chance to reclaim my life. I pictured grand rooms filled with light, a garden where I could breathe and find solace. It was the antithesis of our cramped apartment, a place that had become a prison. As I mulled over this idea, I felt a flicker of excitement. A mansion was not just a physical space, but a representation of my independence. It would be a place where I could redefine who I was, away from the memories of betrayal. I envisioned hosting dinners with friends, enjoying the company of people who appreciated me for who I was, not who I had become in my marriage. But there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind, questioning whether this was the right choice. Was I running away? Or was I making a bold move towards healing? I knew I needed to confront Sarah eventually, to address the devastation she had caused, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I needed time to process my emotions, to understand what I truly wanted. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I decided to take the first step. I began to search for properties online, scrolling through listings of mansions and grand homes. Each image brought a rush of hope, a glimpse of the life I could create for myself. I imagined waking up in a beautiful room, sunlight streaming through large windows, the sound of birds chirping outside. It felt like a dream, yet it was one I was determined to make a reality. As I clicked through images, I stumbled upon a stunning mansion that caught my eye. It was everything I could have hoped for: spacious, modern, and set in a peaceful neighborhood. I felt a rush of excitement as I envisioned my life there, free from the weight of betrayal. I knew I had to see it in person. The next day, I arranged a viewing. As I drove to the property, anticipation bubbled within me. I could feel the tension easing, the weight of my decision becoming lighter. This was the first step toward reclaiming my life. As I approached the mansion, I was struck by its grandeur. The lush gardens and elegant facade filled me with a sense of possibility. Stepping inside, I felt a rush of emotions: hope, excitement, and even a tinge of fear. I wandered through the spacious rooms, imagining how I would fill them with laughter and joy. This was my chance to start anew, to distance myself from the pain of the past. But amidst the excitement, I couldn't shake the thought of Sarah. How would she react when she realized I was leaving? Would she fight for me, or would she simply accept it as a consequence of her actions? I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the realization that I needed to prioritize my own well-being. As I stood in the grand living room, I made my decision. I would move forward, leaving Sarah and the memories of our life behind. The mansion would be my sanctuary, a place where I could heal and rediscover myself. With a newfound sense of determination, I left the property, ready to embrace this new chapter of my life. The decision had been made, and I felt a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension as I prepared to leave Sarah and our small apartment behind. I spent the next few days organizing my thoughts and figuring out the logistics of moving. I was filled with purpose, and the prospect of starting fresh in the mansion fueled my determination. I began packing my belongings, sorting through the clutter that had accumulated over the years. With each item I placed in a box, I felt a sense of liberation. Old photographs, mementos from trips we had taken, and even gifts she had given me, all of it was a reminder of a life that felt increasingly foreign. I debated whether to keep some of these things, but ultimately decided to leave it all behind. I needed a clean break. The day of the move arrived, and I found myself standing in the living room, taking one last look at the apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, suffocating under the weight of memories that had turned sour. I could hear Sarah moving around in the bedroom, her footsteps heavy with the knowledge of what was about to happen. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that would soon unfold. I loaded the last of my boxes into the moving truck and walked back inside. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Sarah stood in the doorway of our bedroom, her eyes red from crying, her expression a mix of sadness and resignation. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment. "I can't stay here, Sarah, not after what you've done." She looked down, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the doorframe. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. I thought we could work through it." "Work through it?" I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface. "How can we work through something when you've broken the foundation of our marriage? You chose him over us. You made that choice." Tears streamed down her cheeks, and I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly extinguished by the bitterness that had taken root in my heart. "I need to leave, Sarah. This isn't home anymore. You've turned it into a prison for me." Her shoulders slumped and she nodded, acceptance dawning on her face. "I understand. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything," I replied, my voice firm but devoid of any joy. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief wash over me. I was leaving her behind, but I was also freeing myself from the shackles of a life that had become unbearable. The drive to the mansion was surreal. I could hardly believe I was leaving my old life behind. I felt like I was moving toward something brighter, something that promised a new beginning. As I pulled up to the mansion, I was struck by its grandeur once again. The sprawling estate stood proudly, a stark contrast to the cramped confines of my former home. Unpacking was a cathartic experience. Each box I opened revealed the remnants of my past, but I was determined to fill this new space with new memories. I arranged the furniture in a way that felt right, taking my time to create an environment that reflected who I was becoming. I hung a few pieces of art that had always inspired me, and I carefully placed photographs of friends and family on the shelves, people who had always been there for me, unlike Sarah. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself settling into this new life. The mansion felt like a blank canvas, and I reveled in the freedom it provided. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on the terrace, watching the sun rise over the horizon. I took long walks through the gardens, enjoying the tranquility of my surroundings. I even began to entertain the idea of hosting friends. It felt good to reconnect with people who had supported me through the turmoil of my marriage. I invited a few close friends over for dinner, and as we gathered around the dining table, laughter filled the air. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of belonging, a sense of self that had been missing for far too long. Yet, even in the midst of this newfound happiness, I couldn't fully escape the shadows of my past. There were moments when I found myself reflecting on my marriage with Sarah, replaying memories in my mind like an old movie. I thought about the signs I had missed, the moments I had brushed aside, and the love that had once filled our home. I realized that I had overlooked my own needs for too long. I had poured myself into being the perfect husband, only to be met with betrayal. It was a harsh lesson, but one that I needed to learn. I had to put myself first, to reclaim my identity and my happiness. As I stood in the grand living room, looking out at the expansive view of the gardens, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. I was ready to embrace this new chapter, to fill my life with experiences that brought me joy and fulfillment. The mansion was not just a physical space. It was a symbol of my independence, a reminder that I could forge my own path. With each passing day, I felt stronger, more empowered. I was ready to leave the past behind and look toward the future. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I was determined to make it mine. As I settled into my new life in the mansion, each day brought with it a sense of renewal and self-discovery. The spacious rooms and serene surroundings felt like a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of my old apartment. I filled my days with activities that brought me joy, long walks in the garden, reading books I had always intended to dive into, and even experimenting in the kitchen. One afternoon, as I was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at the screen and saw it was from one of my friends, Mike. "Hey, want to come over for a barbecue this weekend? It'll be fun." A smile crept onto my face. Socializing had become a rare occurrence during my marriage, a luxury I had neglected. I quickly texted back, "Absolutely, I'd love to." The invitation sparked a wave of excitement within me. I spent the next few days preparing for the barbecue, eager to fill my new home with laughter and camaraderie. I arranged the outdoor seating, set up the grill, and even prepared some of my favorite dishes. As I worked, I felt a sense of purpose and joy that had been absent for far too long. The day of the barbecue arrived, and I welcomed my friends with open arms. As they filtered into the mansion, I felt a surge of happiness. The sound of laughter echoed through the halls, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt alive. We shared stories, reminisced about old times, and celebrated the beauty of friendship. Mike pulled me aside at one point, a knowing look in his eyes. "You seem different, man, happier. This place looks amazing." "Thanks, I appreciate it," I replied, leaning against the kitchen counter. "It feels good to finally reclaim my life." He nodded, his expression serious. "You deserve it. Sarah made a mistake, but don't let it define you. You're better off without her." His words resonated deep within me. I had spent too long allowing her betrayal to linger in my mind, to cloud my vision of the future. I was ready to let go of the past and embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The laughter of my friends mingled with the sounds of nature, creating a symphony of joy that filled the air. I realized that I was not just surviving, I was thriving. I was building a life that reflected my desires, my interests, and my dreams. But even amid the joy, there were moments when I found myself reflecting on my marriage with Sarah. I thought about the good times we had shared, the vacations, the late-night conversations, the dreams we had once built together. It was a bittersweet nostalgia, a reminder of what had been lost. I began to realize that while I could never erase the hurt she caused, I could learn from it. I had overlooked my own desires and needs while trying to maintain a facade of a perfect marriage. The betrayal had forced me to confront the truth about myself. I was not just a husband, but an individual with hopes and dreams that deserved to be prioritized. One evening, as I sat on the terrace, sipping a glass of wine and watching the stars twinkle above, I made a promise to myself. I would never again compromise my happiness for someone else. I would pursue my passions, embrace new experiences, and cultivate relationships that nourished my soul. In the days that followed, I began to explore the neighborhood, discovering hidden gems, quaint cafes, beautiful parks, and friendly faces. I struck up conversations with neighbors, including a lovely woman named Claire who lived a few doors down. She was warm and welcoming, and we quickly bonded over our shared love for gardening. As we exchanged gardening tips and shared stories of our lives, I felt a sense of connection blossoming between us. It was refreshing to engage with someone who seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and experiences. I hadn't felt that kind of connection in a long time, and it sparked a flicker of hope in my heart. Still, there were moments when Sarah would cross my mind, and I would feel a twinge of guilt. I had left her behind, and while I knew it was for the best, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had abandoned her in her time of need. But deep down, I understood that I had to prioritize my own well-being. One afternoon, I decided it was time to confront the past head-on. I sat down and wrote Sarah a letter. I poured my heart out, expressing my feelings of betrayal, anger, and ultimately, my desire to move on. I wanted her to know that while I would always cherish the good times we had shared, I could no longer live in the shadow of her infidelity. I sealed the letter and placed it in an envelope, contemplating whether I would actually send it. It was a cathartic exercise, a way for me to articulate my pain and begin the healing process. I set it aside for the moment, deciding to revisit it later. As I continued to immerse myself in this new lifestyle, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. I was no longer defined by my past. I was forging my own identity, one that was vibrant and full of potential. Life in the mansion was transforming me in ways I had never anticipated. I was learning to let go of the hurt, to embrace the freedom that came with independence. I was ready to write my own story, unencumbered by the weight of betrayal. With each passing day, I felt more like myself again. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that I had the strength to overcome any obstacle. As weeks turned into months, I continued to navigate my new life with a renewed sense of purpose. The mansion had become a sanctuary, a place where I could explore my passions and cultivate new relationships. My friendship with Claire blossomed, and I found myself looking forward to our gardening sessions and long chats. Over coffee, she brought a lightness to my life that I hadn't realized I was missing. One sunny afternoon, as we tended to our plants, Claire glanced at me, her expression thoughtful. "You know, it's admirable how you've rebuilt your life after everything that happened. It takes a lot of courage to start over." I smiled, appreciating her words. "Thank you. I think the hardest part was realizing that I needed to put myself first. I spent so long focusing on someone else that I lost sight of who I was." She nodded, her eyes sincere. "It's easy to get lost in a relationship, especially when you care deeply, but it sounds like you're finding your way back to yourself." Her encouragement meant a lot to me. I was still processing the emotional fallout from my marriage, but I felt stronger with each passing day. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was an individual ready to embrace new experiences and possibilities. Despite my progress, there were still moments when memories of Sarah would creep in, uninvited. I would catch myself thinking about our life together, the dreams we had shared, and the laughter that had once filled our home. I even considered sending her the letter I had written, but something held me back. Part of me felt that she didn't deserve the closure I sought. It was a strange dichotomy, wanting to articulate my pain while also recognizing that I needed to protect my own healing process. One evening, I decided to take a stroll around the neighborhood to clear my mind. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the streets. I walked past familiar houses, greeting neighbors I had come to know. As I turned a corner, I spotted David standing outside his apartment, chatting with a group of friends. My heart raced at the sight of him. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of anger bubbling to the surface, but I quickly reminded myself that I was no longer bound by the past. I was building a new life, one that didn't revolve around the pain he had caused. I walked past him, keeping my head high, refusing to let him have any power over me. Returning home that evening, I felt a sense of pride in my resilience. I had faced the man who had played a role in my heartbreak, and I had emerged unscathed. I was reclaiming my narrative, and I was determined to continue moving forward. As the weeks turned into months, I became more involved in the community. I attended local events, joined a book club, and even volunteered at a nearby shelter. Each experience enriched my life, providing me with a sense of fulfillment I had longed for. I was learning to connect with others on a deeper level, forging friendships that felt genuine and supportive. Claire remained a constant presence in my life, and our bond deepened with each passing day. We would often spend weekends gardening together, sharing laughter and stories. There was something refreshing about our connection. No expectations, no past baggage, just two individuals enjoying each other's company. One evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on the terrace, Claire turned to me with a serious expression. "You know, I admire how you've handled everything. It's not easy to move on from something so painful." I took a sip of wine, contemplating her words. "Thank you. It's been a journey for sure. but I've realized that I can't let what happened define me. I have to focus on the future." She smiled, her eyes shining with understanding. "And what does that future look like for you?" I paused, reflecting on her question. "I want to travel, explore new places, and maybe even find love again one day. But right now, I'm just enjoying this time to rediscover myself." Her gaze softened, and I could sense a shift in the air between us. "You deserve all of that and more," she said, her voice sincere. In that moment, I felt a warmth spread through me. I had spent so long feeling lost and broken, but now I was beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, whether it be new adventures or deeper connections. However, the past still lingered in my mind. I often thought about Sarah and what she was doing, how she was coping with the consequences of her choices. Part of me wanted to reach out, to provide her with the closure I had once sought, but I knew it was a slippery slope. I had to prioritize my own healing, and reaching out to her could reopen wounds I was still trying to mend. One evening, as I sat on the terrace gazing at the stars, I finally decided to send the letter I had written months ago. It felt like a necessary step in my healing process, a way to articulate my feelings without expecting anything in return. I poured my heart into the letter, detailing my pain, my anger, but also my hope for the future. I sealed it with a sense of finality, knowing that once it was sent, I would be ready to let go fully. As I dropped the letter in the mailbox the next day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had confronted the past in my own way, and now it was time to focus on the present and the future. I was ready to embrace the life I had built, one filled with hope, friendship, and the possibility of new love. With each passing day, I felt more confident in my journey. I was no longer defined by my past. I was forging my own path, and I was excited to see where it would lead. As the months rolled on, I settled into a rhythm in my new life. The mansion had transformed from a mere structure into a home filled with laughter and warmth. I hosted gatherings with friends, celebrated milestones, and even created traditions that were uniquely mine. Each day felt like a gift, a reminder that I had the power to shape my own destiny. The letter I sent to Sarah had been a turning point for me. I didn't expect a reply, nor did I want one. It was more about releasing the burden I had carried for so long. I felt lighter, unshackled from the pain of betrayal. I was no longer haunted by the memories of our life together. Instead, I focused on building new memories that brought me joy. One evening, while preparing for a dinner party, I received a text from Claire. "Hey, want to grab coffee before the guests arrive? I have something to tell you." Curiosity piqued, I quickly responded, "Sure, I'll be there in a few." As I walked to the cafe, I felt a flutter of excitement in my chest. Claire had become a significant part of my life, and I cherished our connection. When I arrived, I found her sitting at a cozy corner table, her expression a mix of anticipation and nervousness. "Hey there," she greeted me with a bright smile. "Thanks for coming." "Of course, what's up?" I asked, settling into the chair across from her. She took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with her coffee cup. "I've been thinking about us, and I wanted to talk to you about it." My heart raced. I had sensed a deeper connection between us, but I wasn't sure how she felt. "Okay, I'm listening. I know we've been having a great time together, and I really enjoy our friendship," she began, her eyes locking onto mine. "But I feel like there's something more here. I'm not rushing you, but I wanted to be honest about my feelings." A wave of warmth washed over me. I had been feeling the same way, but had been hesitant to voice it. "I feel it too, Claire. You've brought so much joy into my life, and I can't help but appreciate the connection we've built." Her smile widened, and I could see the relief in her eyes. "Really? I was worried you might not feel the same." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "I've been focusing on healing, but I'd love to explore where this could go. You make me happy, and I think we could create something beautiful together." With that, the tension between us melted away, replaced by a shared understanding. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about our hopes and dreams, laughing and enjoying each other's company. It felt liberating to open my heart again, to allow myself the possibility of love after the heartache I had endured. As the weeks passed, Claire and I grew closer. We shared more than just gardening tips. We shared our lives, our vulnerabilities, and our dreams for the future. I felt alive in a way I hadn't thought possible after my marriage. She encouraged me to pursue my interests, to travel, and to take risks. I realized that I was finally discovering what it meant to live for myself. One evening, as we strolled through a local park, the sun setting in a tapestry of colors, I turned to her. "You've changed my life, you know that." She looked at me, her eyes sparkling. "I feel the same way. You've shown me that it's never too late to start over." As we walked hand in hand, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. I had rebuilt my life, filled it with joy and connection, and I was finally at peace with my past. The mansion was no longer just a symbol of independence. It had become a home filled with love and laughter. I thought about Sarah and the letter I had sent her. I hoped she was finding her own path to healing just as I had. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about condoning her actions. It was about freeing myself from the weight of anger and resentment. I wished her well, but I was ready to move forward without her. As Claire and I watched the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had closed the chapter on my past and opened a new one filled with hope and possibility. I was rediscovering who I was, and I was excited about the journey ahead. In that moment, I realized that life is a series of choices, and I had chosen to embrace mine. I was no longer defined by betrayal. I was defined by resilience, love, and the courage to start anew. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. With a smile on my face and Claire by my side, I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of contentment wash over me. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it, one step at a time. And as I looked toward the horizon, I knew that the best was yet to come.